Alright, chapter 7's a long one. Here we go. Chapter 7, part 3 of Ender's Game. Petra was waiting in the corridor that led to the battle room. Wait a minute, she said to Ender. Rabbit Army just went in. It'll take a few minutes to change to the next battle room. Ender sat down beside her. There's more to the battle room than just switching from one to the next, he said. For instance, why is there gravity in the corridor outside the room just before we go in? Petra closed her eyes. And if the battle rooms are really free-floating, what happens when one is connected? Why doesn't it start to move with the rotation of the school? Ender nodded. These are the mysteries, Petra said in a deep whisper. Don't pry into them. Terrible things happened to the last soldier who tried. He was discovered hanging by his feet from the ceiling of the bathroom with his head stuffed in the toilet. Of course she was joking, but the message was clear. So I'm not the first person to ask the question. You remember this, little boy? And when she said little boy, it sounded friendly, not contemptuous. They never tell you any more truth than they have to, but any kid with brains knows that there've been some changes in science since the old days of Mazar Rackham and the victorious fleet. Obviously, we can control gravity. Turn it on and off, change the direction, maybe reflect it. I've thought of lots of neat things you could do with the gravity weapons and gravity drives of the starships. And think of how starships could move near planets, maybe tear big chunks out of them by reflecting the planet's own gravity back onto itself, only from another direction, and focus down on a smaller point. But they said nothing. Ender understood more than she said. Manipulation of gravity was one thing, deception by the officers was another. But the more important message was this: the adults are the enemy, not the other armies. They do not tell us the truth. Come, little boy, she said. The battle room is ready. Petra's hands were steady. The enemy is deadly. She giggled. Petra the poet, they call me. They also say you're crazy as a loon. Better believe it, baby butt. She had 10 targeted balls in a bag. Ender held onto her suit with one hand and the wall with another to steady her as she threw them hard in different directions. In the null gravity, they bounced every which way. Let go of me, she said. She shoved off, spinning deliberately. With a few deft hand movements, she steadied herself and began aiming carefully at ball after ball. When she shot one, it glowed and changed from white to red. Ender knew the color change lasted less than 2 minutes. Only one ball had changed back to white when she got to the last one. She rebounded accurately from the wall and came at a high speed back to Ender. He caught her and held her against her own rebound, one of the first techniques they'd had taught him as a launchie. You're good, he said. None better, and you're going to learn how to do it. Petra taught him to hold his arms straight, to aim with the whole arm. Something most soldiers don't realize is that the further away your target is, the longer you have to hold the beam within about a 2-centimeter circle. It's the difference between 1/10 of a second and 1/2 a second, but in battle, that's a long time. A lot of soldiers think they missed when they were right on target, but they moved away too fast. So you can't use your gun like a sword. Swish, 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 slice them in half. You've got to aim. She used the ball collar to bring the targets back, then launched them slowly, one by one. Ender fired at them. He missed every one. Good, she said. You don't have any bad habits. I don't have any good ones either, he pointed out. I'll give you those. They didn't accomplish much the first morning, mostly talk. How to think when you're aiming. You've got to hold your own motion and your enemy's motion in your mind at the same time. You've got to hold your arms straight out and aim at your body. Aim with your body, so in case your arm is frozen, you can still shoot. Learn where your trigger actually fires from ride the edge so you don't have to pull so far each time you fire. Relax your body, don't tense up. It makes you tremble. It was the only practice Ender got that day. During the army's drills in the afternoon, Ender was ordered to bring his desk and do schoolwork, sitting in the corner of the room. Bonzo had to bring all his soldiers to the battle room, but he didn't have to use them. Ender did not do his schoolwork, however. If he couldn't drill as a soldier, he could study Bonzo as a tactician. Salamander Army was divided into the standard 4 toons of 10 soldiers each. Some commanders set up their toons so that A toon consisted of the best soldiers and D toon had the worst. Bonzo had mixed them, so that each consisted of good soldiers and weaker ones. Except that B-Toon only had 9 boys. Ender wondered who had been transferred to make room for him. It soon became plain that the leader of Toon B was new. No wonder Bonzo was so disgusted. He had lost a Toon leader to get Ender. And Bonzo was right about another thing. Ender was not ready. All the practice time was spent working on maneuvers. Toons that couldn't see each other practiced performing precision operations together with exact timing. Toons practiced using each other to make sudden changes of direction without losing formation. All these soldiers took for granted skills that Ender didn't have. The ability to make a soft landing and absorb most of the shock, accurate flight, course adjustment using frozen soldiers, floating randomly through rooms, rolls, spins, dodges, sliding along the walls. A very difficult maneuver, and yet one of the most valuable, since the enemy couldn't get behind you. Even as Ender learned how much he didn't know, he also saw things that he could improve on. The well-rehearsed formations were a mistake. It allowed the soldiers to obey shouted orders instantly, but it also meant they were predictable. Also, the individual soldiers were given little initiative. Once a pattern was set, they were to follow it through. There was no room for adjustment to what the enemy did against the formation. Ender studied Bonzo's formation like the enemy commander would, noting ways to disrupt the formation. During free play that night, Ender asked Petra to practice with him. No, she said. I want to be commander someday, so I've got to play in the game room. It was a common belief that teachers monitored the games and spotted potential commanders there. Ender doubted it, though. Toon leaders had a way better chance to show what they could do as a commander than a video player. But he didn't argue with Petra. And the after-breakfast practice was generous enough. Still, he had to practice. And he couldn't practice alone except for a few basic skills. Most of the hard things required partners or teams. If only he had Alai or Shen with him. Well, why shouldn't he practice with them? He had never heard of a soldier practicing with launchies, but there was no rule against it. It just wasn't done. Launchies were held in too much contempt. Well, Ender was still being treated like a launchie anyway. He needed someone to practice with, and in return, he could help them learn some things he saw the older boys doing. Hey, the great soldier returned, said Bernard. Ender stood in the doorway of the old barracks. He'd only been away for a day, but already it seemed like an alien place. And the others of his launch group were strangers. Almost he turned around and left. But there was Alai, who had made their friendship sacred. Alai was not a stranger. Ender made no effort to conceal how he was treated in Salamander Army. And they're right. I'm about as useless as a sneeze in a spacesuit. Alai laughed, and the other launchies started to gather round. Ender proposed his bargain. Free play, every day, working hard in the battle room, under Ender's direction. They would learn things from the armies from the battles Ender would see, and he would get the practice he needed to develop soldier skills. We'll be ready together. We'll get ready together. A lot of boys wanted to come too. Sure, Ender said. If you're coming to work. If you're just farting around. If you're just farting around, you're out. I don't have any time to waste. They didn't waste any time. Ender was clumsy, trying to describe what he'd seen, working out ways to do it. But by the time the free play ended, they had learned some new things. They were tired, but they got the knack of a few techniques. Where were you? Asked Bonzo. Ender stood stiffly by his commander's bunk, practicing in the battle room. I hear you had some of your old launchy group with you. I couldn't practice alone. I won't have any soldiers in Salamander Army hanging around with launchies. You're a soldier now. Ender regarded him in silence. Did you hear me, Wiggin? Yes, sir. No more practicing with those little farts. May I speak to you privately? Asked Ender. It was a request that commanders were required to allow. Bonzo's face went angry, and then he led Ender into a room in the corridor. Listen, Wiggin, I don't want you. I'm trying to get rid of you, but don't give me any problems and I'll paste you to the wall. A good commander, thought Ender, doesn't have to make stupid threats. Bonzo grew annoyed at Ender's silence. Look, you asked me to come out here. Now talk. Sir, you were correct not to place me in a tomb. I don't know how to do anything. I don't need you to tell me when I'm correct. But I'm going to become a good soldier. I won't screw up your regular drill, but I'm going to practice. I'm going to practice with the only people who will practice with me, and that's my launchies. You'll do what I tell you to do, you little bastard. That's right, sir. I'll follow the orders that you're authorized to give. But free play is free. No assignments can be given. None. By anyone. He could see Bonzo's anger growing hot. Hot anger was bad. Ender's anger was cold, and he could use it. Bonzo's was hot, so it used him. Sir, I've got my own career to think of, and I won't interfere with your training and battles, but I've got to learn sometime. I didn't ask you to be put in your army if you're trying to trade me as soon as you can, but nobody will take me if I don't know anything, will they? Let me learn something, and then you can get rid of me all the sooner and get a soldier you can use. Bonzer was not such a fool that the Ender kept him from recognizing good sense when he heard it. Still, he couldn't let go of his anger immediately. While you're in Salamander Army, you'll obey me. If you try to control my free play, I can get you iced. It probably wasn't true, but it was possible. Certainly, if Ender made a fuss about it, interfering with free play could conceivably get Bonzo removed from command. Also, there was the fact that officers obviously saw something in Ender, since they had promoted him. Maybe Ender did have influence enough with the teachers to ice somebody. Bastard, said Bonzo. It isn't my fault. You gave me an order in front of everybody. You gave me that order in front of everybody. But if you want, I'll pretend you won this argument. Then tomorrow you can tell me you changed your mind. I don't need you to tell me what to do. I don't want the other guys to think you back down. You wouldn't be able to command as well. Bonzo hated him for the kindness. Ender tried to understand why. Maybe it seemed to Bonzo as if Ender was granting him a command as a favor. Galling, and yet he had no choice about anything. Well, it was Bonzo's fault for giving Ender an unreasonable order. Still, he would only know that Ender had beaten him, and then rubbed his nose in it by being so magnanimous. I'll have your ass someday, Bonzo said. Probably, said Ender. The lights out buzzer sounded. Ender walked back to the room, looking dejected, beaten, angry. The other boys drew the obvious conclusion. And in the morning, as Ender was leaving for breakfast, Bonzo stopped him and spoke loudly. I changed my mind, Pinprick. Maybe by practicing your launchies, you'll learn something I can trade you easier. By practicing with your launchies, you'll learn something I can trade you easier. Anything to get rid of you faster. Thank you, sir, Ender said. Anything, whispered Bonzo. I hope you're iced. Ender smiled gratefully and left the room. After breakfast, he practiced again with Petra. All afternoon, he watched Bonzo drill and figured out ways to destroy his army. During free play, he and Alai and the others worked themselves to exhaustion. I can do this, thought Ender as he lay in his bed, his muscles throbbing and knotting themselves. I can handle it.